Hi, San Diego State EdTech. Today we're going over the question formulation technique, or the QFT. It's taken from the text Make Just One Change by Dan Rothenstein and Lou Santana. And it is a really great technique and process to dig deeper, to peel back the onion, kind of think deeply about a topic, and kind of take the individual time and collaborative time to examine all aspects of a certain topic or question, perhaps a novel, an event, or really anything that could produce some inquisitive thinking. So, our personal goal for the QFT for EDL 655 is to apply the question formulation technique to specifically design thinking and other processes in the future in order to examine an idea more closely or provide the participants ownership. Some things to think about while we're going over this technique together is how would we modify this technique with students, and how would we modify this technique amongst colleagues and staff. So, when we're designing a Q focus, basically an idea to begin questioning around, a statement, or perhaps some interesting story, a short reading, could be a video, a photograph, some visual, a poem, or perhaps even a novel. A Q focus can be longer or shorter depending on the length of your project. It could be an introduction, it could be something as a reflection near the end. For our Q focus today, we are going to be examining the statement, "We live in a rapidly changing global society." So, three things to think about. Does it have a clear focus? Does it provoke and stimulate new lines of thinking? And does it maintain a neutral teacher stance or individual stance? So we're going to take this statement and we're going to produce questions around it. We're going to ask as many questions as we possibly can. We are not going to stop to discuss, judge, or answer any of these questions while we're brainstorming. We write down every question exactly as it is stated. And if we have any statements around this statement, we turn it into a question. So, for instance, going back to my Q focus, if I was doing this within a group, actually, I'm going to allow you guys right now to go ahead and take about 5 minutes and write as many questions as possible. As many questions as possible. Go ahead and stop the video for a second. So after questioning, you're going to share within a collaborative group. For instance, some questions might be, why is our global society changing so rapidly? What does this mean for our students to live in a rapidly changing global society? How does a competent workforce evolve to have the skill sets to be successful in a rapidly changing global society? What does that mean about our interactions and communications with those around the globe? Perhaps more divergent questions, and what will transportation look like? How does changing in a rapid global society affect our relationships and our time management? Does this mean that we are limited in the global society that we know now, or is there some life beyond our Earth that will change very shortly? And any question whatsoever, we are not limiting ourselves or judging during that time. So now that we have our questions, we are going to label them. So for every open-ended question, put an O next to it. And for every closed-ended question that has one answer or is more data-based, put a C next to it. Go ahead and do so now. Some of the advantages and disadvantages of closed and open-ended questions are very similar to convergent and divergent thinking. Sometimes we need to brainstorm and we need to broaden our perspective. And for an open-ended question, it does just that. How are we going to push our thinking? How are we going to explore the topic more deeply, more widely? And other times, a closed ended question is more for convergent thinking. Perhaps we need to now think within these constraints. Perhaps we want to examine one piece closer of a holistic viewpoint, or just specifically zone in on one character of a novel. So, like we said before, divergent thinking is really for getting unstuck. It's open ended exploration by expanding our channels of possibilities. Convergent thinking is really narrowing it down to the important information, changing questions to sharpen the scope of inquiry. And then there's also metacognitive thinking that we talked about during critical thinking, which is how am I doing this process? Reflective thinking about the evolution of personal growth or its process, and that we're always reflecting while we're completing these processes. So, depending on the type of mindset that you want to adopt based on the um, goal for your question formulation technique, you are going to focus more and perhaps change some open ended to closed questions, or perhaps change some closed questions to open ended questions. And for our design thinking purpose, ideation, perhaps you're doing more open ended questions. And then for the second part of ideation, you are looking at your constraints and perhaps you change some of those open ended questions to more closed ended questions. So now that we have our open-ended questions, we've refocused our goal, we are going to prioritize these questions. Um, Usually the criteria for prioritizing is set by an instructor, but as you are going in different directions for each group and in different phases, you are going to have different priorities for different question formulation technique phases. So perhaps choose the three most questions that are the most interesting or that you need to be the central focus that are the most important. What are the three questions that will best help you design your research project, or that will help you best design your design thinking challenge or resolve the problem at hand? Some other ideas for implementation, perhaps within the classroom or within staff meetings, in the beginning of a unit, perhaps to identify specific topics of research or study to assess prior knowledge. You could perhaps guide the reading or kind of think about a mindset that you want to adopt during reading. In the middle of a unit, you could be generating questions to shape their own homework assignments. A lot of times we don't give students enough credit and we make them a passive participant. So, really asking them to dig deeper. Perhaps you could ask them to do 3 close ended and 3 open ended questions for one topic or one chapter, and really asking them to identify the priorities within that content. And formative assessment for learning, making sure that we're checking for understanding throughout this time, and this question formulation technique really leads itself to that. Or at the end of unit, so helping prepare for a final presentation, questions to interview outside resources or personnel, and to really reflect as a progression of growth and reviewing questions from the beginning and then comparing them to the end. Within a staff, perhaps it's to identify certain issues that you are going to be looking at throughout a time of analysis. It could be to check your work and to make sure that you're staying focused in the progression of a project. It could be at the end to make sure that our systems are sharpened and that the system that we have in place really works for the professional development that we're doing, or for whatever topic at hand that our staff is addressing. For our specific purposes within design thinking, it could be to assist during defining the challenge, asking questions and prioritizing those questions to see what major important themes arise, and that to reach consensus amongst your collaborative team. It could be to define the end users, to build questions for the end users and experts. During the interpretation phase, it could be around the how might we questions when we're trying to develop a point of view. It could be metacognitive questions and double checking our processes and making sure that we're on the right track. In the ideation phase, it could be for combining effective ideas. And you could also be questioning for constraints and really prioritizing what are the main constraints that we need to be addressing in our second round of ideation. Lastly, in the evolution phase, the questions to guide reflection. So, what are some questions for metacognitive thinking again in the overall process? What are some refinements that we're going to adjust to our prototype and from the feedback that we got from our end users and colleagues? So this is a video, and the link on the bottom, it is from the Right Question organization, who also co-created the text, Make Just One Change. This is an example of the QFT in a classroom where a teacher does this process in the beginning of a unit around a novel. So if you wanted to see what that looks like in the classroom. We'll be doing this process during office hours, and so hopefully this will be a quick preview, and then we'll run through it really briefly in our office hours together. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll be happy to assist you and jump in on any hangouts or meetings that you might have if you would like to do the QFT process together. All right, thanks. Talk soon.